Thank you.
Can you see that, Sam?
I can certainly see it.
Someone can see it.
I can too.
I was on mute, wasn't I?
Thank you. Okay,
yeah.
so people can see it and they can hear me. Okay. If not, Sam, if you can just flag that to me, that would be really helpful. Otherwise, I'm not always aware that if I'm talking to no one can hear me. And if Sam, you're able to just start recording, that'd be great. As usual. Lovely, thank you. As usual, we're recording the presentation, but when we get to any sort of more sort of chat elements to it, we will stop recording. And obviously we'll make these slides and the recording available. Before I introduce myself, I just want to make an apology for the little Dell data protection thing that you've got probably in the bottom right of your screens. I can't get rid of it. It's been on my computer for a couple of weeks now and it just sits there and it doesn't do much harm, but I apologise for it sitting there. Anyway, hello, I'm Rachel Woolrich. I'm a clinical psychologist in psychological medicine. And this session is going to be focusing on how we can build our resilience and balance during this stage of the COVID pandemic. So I just want to thank my colleagues Gwyn and Emma for their development of earlier versions of these slides. And this is a theme that has been raised by staff over the last few weeks, but it has been raised before, so we're revisiting it today. And some of the ideas I'm going to share have been touched on before, or they may be concepts that you feel quite familiar with. Sometimes people say, oh, psychology, it's just common sense really, isn't it? And I would say, yes, you're right. If you have thoughts like that, it is common sense, but it's not very common. So that's to say we might feel like we know this stuff, but we don't always put it into practice. So I invite you to practice with me today. So we really want these wellbeing sessions to be useful and for staff to come away with some ideas of what they might do to help themselves and colleagues. And today we're going to start by thinking about our current position in the pandemic in terms of psychological response. We'll then briefly think about how we understand resilience before focusing on 3 ideas for supporting ourselves as individuals. So these ideas are not specifically focused on our work environment, but our broader lives. And this is important because our broader lives can offer us opportunity for resilience at work. So we will, during subsequent wellbeing lead forums, focus on how to support resilience from a team perspective or supporting colleagues. But for today, whether you're a wellbeing lead or a member of staff, I'd just like you to think about yourself. We will have some time to share ideas or reflections if you choose, when I really welcome your contribution. And we'll probably do that via the chat function just to manage the size of the group. And then after that, we're going to finish with a 5 or 6 minute resilience practice. So you might want to, at this point, just grab a piece of paper and a pen to have on hand, because it might help you engage in some of the reflective exercises that I'll be talking about during the presentation. But it's entirely up to you. So where are we on our pandemic journey? And what was predicted for us in terms of psychological response? So this conceptualization is taken from the guidelines developed by the British Psychological Society, specifically on the needs of healthcare staff as a result of the pandemic. So some of you have probably seen this already. So after the anticipatory anxiety in the preparation phase and the initial adrenaline of surging forward with solutions and contribution at the start of the active phase, we're now having to sustain this effort and frequently experiencing disillusionment and exhaustion. So this second part of the active phase is the period when it's thought that we are at highest psychological risk. We might neglect our physical and psychological self-care as we feel it's not really a priority. Moral distress and injury are a risk as healthcare becomes limited and people are unable to react or respond within their own moral or ethical code. Death and dying might not be handled in the way that staff, patients and families would ideally want. And we may begin to feel emotionally disconnected from work. We might experience compassion fatigue. And we may engage in avoidant or unhelpful coping and have thoughts such as, oh, what's the point? This will never end. Engaging in behaviours maybe like drinking more alcohol or giving up other activities. Due to the chronic nature of the stress, there might be increased tensions at home and with the wider family, which are going to spill into work life. Stress has a cumulative effect, and when we are depleted, the smaller things trigger reactions. This in turn snowballs into guilt, self-criticism, prompting us to just keep pushing on, but actually increasing the likelihood of exhaustion and burnout. Staff with pre-existing vulnerabilities might be at higher risk of crisis and suicidality at this point. Maybe just thinking, I can't do this anymore. There's no sugarcoating this. This is grim, but it is also expected. So experiencing these symptoms of stress and exhaustion doesn't mean you're not up to the job. It means you're a human being, you're stressed, you're fatigued because you care, and we can comfort ourselves a little bit by reminding ourselves this phase was predicted. We are in it. The recovery phase will come. Can I just pause one moment? Just remind everyone to put themselves on mute if they can, unless they need to let me know something, just so that we avoid the interference of the sound. Thanks very much. So is there anything we can do to be resilient and survive this phase? Or do we just cross our fingers and hope to come up for air soon? Well, first of all, it's important to think about what being resilient is and what it isn't, to ensure our expectations of ourselves and others are fair, realistic, and compassionate. So resilience is a process, something we can practice and develop. It's not a trait that we're born with or without. The process of developing resilience comes from transcending difficulty and challenge, not from getting rid of difficulty. So it's about acknowledging distress, getting up after falling over and adapting. It's not a competition to put on the bravest face. It's not about never failing. And it's not a token effort either. Resilience is developed through an interaction between the individual and the support around them. It's not about coping alone, developing a thick skin, or tolerating a toxic environment. This is where some of our trust values are really important to hold in mind, such as compassion, and how the idea of all of us being part of one team, one OUH, are paramount. And finally, a really important idea that resilience develops through being flexible so that we bend rather than being rigid so we break. This is a quote or a proverb that probably some of you know and have seen already from the Japanese Zen tradition. 7 times we fall down, we stand up 8. And the idea behind this is that 8th stand up is what resilience is all about. It's that idea of adapting and learning every time we fall, every time something's distressing, when we think we can't go on. It's learned through falling down, but the falling down, the exhaustion, the disillusionment that we might be feeling at this time is not what defines us. So how do we brace ourselves and develop our resilience? So I've chosen 3 ideas, slightly interconnected, from the psychological literature that have been shown to be helpful. And I'm going to outline them here and give you a bit of time to think about them in relation to your own life. So I'll ask some questions for you to reflect on as we're going through, and then we'll pause and I'll summarize the questions so we've got a bit more time to think about them. So the first is about developing self-awareness. The second is paying attention to topping up our cup of resources. And the third is about connecting with our whole sense of self and the values that guide us. So first of all, self-awareness. Self-awareness is useful, it's helpful, because it allows us to be intentional about what we do next. So it allows us to make wiser choices as we move forward with our day. And we can do this by directing our attention to our experience of the present moment. So that's what mindfulness is all about. So we can direct our attention to what's going on in our mind right now, what our emotions are in this moment, what body sensations we might notice, or what we're actually doing, or what urges we might feel like we have. So if I am able to notice in the present moment that I am tired, maybe I can take a rest. If I notice now that I'm tense in the shoulders, can I just do a couple of stretches? If I notice now that I'm worried, can I define that and talk to someone? So we can also use, as well as giving us a sort of a wisdom to think about how we respond to ourselves and what we do next with intention, we can also use mindful practice to ground us in the present moment. Noticing the now can sometimes stop our mind racing into the future or dwelling on the past, and either of those things might be causing us distress. So as we notice what's going on for us, as we're mindful, can we dive a bit deeper and actually start spotting those unhelpful thoughts or coping behaviours? So maybe I notice a thought such as, well, you should be able to cope with this, or you don't have a right to be sad. But this thinking tells us that we're wrong to feel the way we are. And actually that's not helpful and probably makes us feel worse. Can I pay attention to some behaviours that I'm engaging in, such as maybe drinking more alcohol or stopping exercise, checking the news more frequently, avoiding talking to others? And if we notice those critical thoughts, can we respond maybe slightly differently to ourselves than just drinking in a negative self-criticism? Maybe we can say, well, yeah, I notice I'm being tough on myself. It has been a challenging day. I'm tired. I'm upset. How can I look after myself this evening? So I know there are lots of mindfulness resources available on the internet or through apps, and through some of the wellbeing pages via the Trust intranet. Also aware that Niels de Turt, one of my colleagues, will be offering a talk on one of these wellbeing talks on focusing on mindfulness. But if you want to, do approach your wellbeing lead if you want to know more about actually practicing mindfulness, and we can obviously share resources that we know about. So this looking after ourselves, this responding to ourselves, if we notice some negative thinking, or we notice exhaustion, or we notice sadness, this looking after ourselves brings me on to the second idea. So how can we nourish ourselves or replenish our cup so we can keep pouring out care for others, whether that's patients and or colleagues? So looking after ourselves is deeply connected to how we care for others. And pushing ourselves to that point of exhaustion means we can't look after others anymore. So sometimes we might feel a bit guilty for taking time out for ourselves. But anchoring that to our value of caring for others might help us realise there is value in looking after ourselves. So when we are feeling exhausted, or we're feeling really vulnerable to depleted energy, high emotion, it can be helpful to pay attention to the activities that nourish us or deplete us. And so this is something that we can think about just in terms of our day-to-day, everyday activities. What are the ones that nourish us? And what are the ones that deplete us? So nourishing means that they might give you improved mood, make you feel good, make you feel rested or connected or joyful or purposeful. Whereas activities that deplete us might leave us feeling drained or tired, fed up, low, worried. So I'd just like you to think about a typical day for yourself, starting from when you get up. And you might want to just start making a list of the activities you engage in. So this might include things like getting dressed, brushing your teeth, as well as seemingly more important activities like, well, dropping the kids at school, or doing my shift, or driving home. And as you list these activities, just like you to consider each one in terms of whether it nourishes you or whether it depletes you. Maybe some you might feel are neutral. It neither nourishes me or depletes me. Some you might feel it's actually both, or that it changes regularly. So for example, you might think of brushing your teeth as a nourishing activity because it's a step in self-care, or that it really refreshes your breath, or that often you brush your teeth looking at your lovely garden and it connects you to that. Or you might notice that it actually usually leaves you feeling pretty depleted because you're doing it in a rush. You're noticing how grubby the sink is, and that leaves you feeling a bit fed up with the chores that you haven't managed to get to yet. So you won't be able to finish this exercise now, but I really encourage you to do this in your own time, and then to think about whether it's possible to make more time for the activities that nourish you and to drop some of the stuff that depletes you. Now, I do appreciate that we can't drop the stuff that depletes us sometimes. So when that's the case, can we approach an activity slightly differently? So here we can see that flexibility is really key. So this was an example I talked about with a colleague fairly recently. I don't know whether it resonates with any with you, but I might notice I feel depleted when I do the washing, especially if I also notice that everyone else in my family seems to be resting and watching television. So I can feel resentment, irritation in my body. Maybe I sigh loudly, hoping someone will offer to help, but they don't. And I feel resentful and fed up, and I start noticing all the other jobs that need doing. And I notice how tired I am after being on shift. And well, to be honest, that's good noticing. That's good paying attention to ourselves in that moment. And maybe in that sort of situation, it might be helpful to think about, actually, I need to respond by communicating with my family to see whether I can get some help. But if that's not possible, maybe I can connect to the values that drive my behaviour of doing the washing. Things like, well, actually, I want to be a loving, caring mother who models giving to her family. And actually, this doing the washing is an action that shows that. It shows my love and care for them. Maybe I can put some headphones on while I'm doing it, listening to my favourite music, direct my attention to the values of love and care that drive me in this moment. And maybe I notice my tiredness too, and I can think about how I'm going to respond to that next. It might not be revolutionary, but it might just become a little less depleting if I can hold those things in mind, because I've connected to the core of the person I want to be. Perhaps it's sounding a bit unrealistic, and I wonder if some of you are having some cynical thoughts in response to this idea. But all I do is I invite you to try it out, see what your experience is of doing it. So as this presentation continues, perhaps you can identify one nourishing activity that you want to do more of, one depleting activity that you can perhaps do a bit less of, and one that maybe you can shift your approach with. I'm just going to pause for just a minute or two, just in case you need just a moment to capture an idea from that. Although I will summarise that question in one of the upcoming slides. Okay, so finally, just the third idea. And this is about thinking about the roles or the aspects of your life that are really important to you. So I've drawn here an example pie chart with some ideas of important roles or sections of someone's life. And I expect for a lot of us here that work will be a very large piece of the pie at the moment, bigger perhaps than usual. So this is an exercise that, again, you can try for yourself, drawing out a pie chart, thinking about the areas of your life and just apportioning them as they are at the moment, noticing which ones perhaps dominate, which ones have been really squeezed quite small. So at times like this, in a crisis, in a situation such as the pandemic, it's unavoidable that perhaps certain aspects of our life is going to dominate. But if this continues for too long, we can really lose our sense of who we are, and we stop engaging in those roles that actually might nourish us. So our resilience reduces. So to be resilient, to be able to cope when there's a major stressor going on in our life, we want to have good balance, good breadth in our life pie chart so that we've got various areas that can really nourish us. So this is an idea that's a little bit like the exhaustion funnel. I know that's something that's been shared, whereby as we get sucked more into a challenge or a crisis, we start dropping the things that perhaps seem like they're not a priority, like rest and play. And actually we get sucked then into more and more work and end up just being at the bottom, exhausted. So, as I said, can you think about the parts of your life in your pie chart that you're not able to attend to or invest in so much at the moment. Totally understandably. And just taking this one step further, it can be helpful to connect the values that underpin those roles and parts of our life. So these are the qualities that underpin what we do. They're what really matters to us in the end. And there's something that don't change regardless of the current difficulties. So if goals are the places we want to get to in life, our values are the compass point that set our direction of travel. So from the previous pie chart, I've taken the parts or the roles of that person's life from the pie chart, and I've just thought about maybe some of the values that might underpin them on the right. It's not exhaustive, it's just to kind of give you some examples. So I asked you to think about the areas of your life that you feel less able to invest in at the moment. Just taking one of those areas, can you bring to mind the values that underpin that part of your life? So why is that part of your life important? What is it about it that you value so greatly? What does it give you? Just give you a moment to think about that. I appreciate you haven't had much time to reflect on it, but with any values that you have identified in mind, can you think about whether there are other ways to invest in that part of your life, the column on the left, using those values as your guide? So I'll give you an example. So maybe we're feeling really distressed, really aware that we feel we can't be a very good daughter at the moment because we can't really support our parents in the same way as we used to. So this part of our pie chart feels like it's been really squeezed. And this is distressing because it's really important to us and it's somewhat unavoidable. But what is really important is the values that underpin the role of being a daughter to our parents, not any specific activity. So these values are not diminished, even if, say, physical contact or support might feel like it is. We might need to be flexible, realistic, adjust our expectations in the current circumstances. But if our values are our compass, then we connect with what matters to us. Now, why does this help with exhaustion and support resilience? Because this feels fulfilling, it feels comforting, and it counterbalances the disillusionment. When we engage in committed action that's guided by our values, it can really help us to reignite a sort of spark of energy that comes from engaging with the things that are really truly important to us. This stuff remains within our control, and so much of what's going on around us feels like it's outside of our control. So this is why this can be a helpful thing to think about when we're experiencing exhaustion and disillusionment with a really big part of our lives. Okay, so I know I've posed a few questions for you over the past few slides, focusing on those three areas of self-awareness, investing in self-awareness, using present moment focus, topping up the cup through trying to tip the balance towards more nourishing activities, and connecting with our whole self and the values that underpin us. So I've just summarised these questions here for you to continue in your personal reflection. But I also invite you now to share any thoughts, ask any questions, or write any reflections about any of the things that you've heard me speak about. And I think it probably works best if people can use the chat function. I can't actually see it while I'm sharing my slides, but Sam, if you're able to see it and can perhaps read out any comments that are kind of being posted in relation to this, that would be really helpful. I do appreciate some of these questions are really personal, and you may not want to share them with anyone here, and that's absolutely fine. Please don't feel obliged to share. Be interesting to hear if people use these sorts of strategies or are familiar with these ideas.
We've had a comment, Rachel, saying it's been hard, particularly for those who've been shielding, and I wonder if that's maybe about feeling a bit disconnected from the role of being at work.
Yes, absolutely. One can imagine, I guess, in potentially if someone's been shielding, the values that they attach to work perhaps have been challenged a bit, that they're feeling unsure of how, how they're contributing, or they're not able to contribute in the same way as they usually can. I guess for me, what I think about there is that flexibility of connecting to the values that underpin our work, and thinking about, okay, well, it's contributing that's important to me. How could I maybe still do that, or feel that I'm doing that while I'm shielding? I can't do what I've done before, but it's the contribution piece or a sense of purpose that is what is really important to me. And maybe having that conversation with a manager to think about how else you could, people can continue to do that.
So there was a follow-up on that, talking also about feeling disconnected from colleagues. So maybe feeling like they're missing out on that value of connection and team, sort of team spirit, perhaps.
That's something that I've definitely heard recently, and I guess, we get told, don't we, it's so important to feel like we're part of a team and connect and hold, a shared sense of going through this difficult journey together. But at the same time, we're all experiencing our teams being fragmented, aren't we? Some of the teams at home, some of the teams on site, some of the teams being redeployed, and that just can create a sense of disunity or of not going through the same shared experience. And I think that's really challenging. So I know that is something that's going to be thought about and shared within the Wellbeing Leads Forum in a sort of a week or so's time, to think about how do we still hold on to sense of team and feel more connected with colleagues, even if we're having slightly different experiences of this. And I suppose I would argue again, coming back to values, of actually probably that is what we still share, whatever our position in the crisis, wherever we are, from front to back line, are the values and the support we can give each other. But I think that is a significant challenge at the moment. I don't know whether that was the sort of thing that whoever made the comment was kind of getting at.
So there have been a couple more. So or a range of different things, really. So maybe a comment around not being able to be the family member that we like, so not being able to see parents, relatives, and friends. And then I think just a couple of ones on the topic of it feeling like work, or feeling like it's hard to separate work and home.
I'm curious about that one, whether that's something about when one has to work at home, or whether it just feels that COVID is everywhere, and it's a focus of work when you're on site, and yet you get home and it's on the news and it's everywhere, that it's hard to get a break from. Perhaps both of those things. Thank you for those. I'm conscious, I don't want to kind of cut anything off. I'm just conscious of the time, and your time is certainly really precious, everyone. And what I'd really like to do is to take us onto an exercise. Oh, I've just jumped ahead. Sorry, I missed a slide there. To actually just practice a resilience exercise just for 5 minutes, given that we've taken the time to sort of be here today. So the slide I just jumped, that I think in my slideshow I can't go back to now, was literally just summarising what I've touched on today. So that idea that we're in an expected phase of dealing with the pandemic, and that the distress, the fatigue, the disillusionment, the disconnection are all normal, and that resilience can be practiced. It's about being flexible, about seeking support and acknowledging how tough it is. Now, I've not gone into the whole connecting with your team, seeking support side of resilience in this session, because I've been focusing more on us as individuals, but that is something that will come. And I've just given 3 ideas today about ways we can think about investing in our own resilience right now. So the developing self-awareness, that topping up the cup, thinking about what nourishes us, and holding on to our whole self, holding our values in mind, because actually connecting with what really matters is, in the end, gives us comfort, and it gives us some meaning and control. So I will hope this works. I'm going to have to come out of this and just go in here. Now, didn't that work? Bear with me, everyone. I was able to go into it last time. So I've got some resources here. Aha, here we are, it does work. Some resources here of some previous talks that have been done on the topic, and links to a document. There's a lot out there, so I've only picked out a few. But this is just going to take us to a brief 5-minute YouTube resilience practice led by my colleague Gwyn. And then when that finishes, we will shut things down, and we will end this session. I really thank you for taking the time to be here, and also if you're able to leave some comments or complete the feedback form in the chat at the end, that would be really helpful, so that we can make sure that what we're doing is helpful. So.
Rachel, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't hear.
You might need to switch it to your computer sound.
Okay, thank you.
I can't
Thanks,
hear
Sam.
anything.
Right, let's see. How do I do that? If I come...
If you go into Teams, Rachel, somewhere in your device settings, you just need to switch your audio to your computer, I think, if that's possible.
when you share your screen, when you go to share screen, if you unshare your screen, then go back to share, there's a little box that you tick that says computer sound. So
Oh,
if you
lovely.
unshare now.
Hang on, I'm trying to do that and it's not letting me do that. Where are
That's
we?
what I was getting at, Ruth. Thank you.
Ooh, go away. Okay, share. Teams.
So you share, there should be a little box before you share.
Right, so I'm up unshared. So is that right? I've unshared everybody.
So now if you go to share, and before you share, you'll see a small box.
Oh yes, includes computer sound. This
Yeah.
is a brilliant lesson. Thank you, and I'm so sorry everybody that I didn't know that before.
Exactly the same thing happened to me.
Thank you very much. We will try again, and I totally understand if people want to. Oh, I've gone from the wrong slide. Sorry. Feel like they need to go. If you're able to do this, it is a good 5 minutes to invest in yourself.
Okay, so welcome. I'm Gwen Webster. I'm a clinical psychologist at Oxford Psychological Medicine Centre, and I'm really glad you're taking a few minutes to look after yourself in this way today. This is a short practice aimed at helping you strengthen your capacity for resilience. So strengthening your resilience muscle, if you like. Taking a moment to be comfortable, if possible, sitting or lying down if you can do that, and allowing the body to settle. Closing your eyes if that feels helpful. Maybe beginning by taking a deep breath, then slowly breathing out. Allowing your breathing to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Just your normal breathing rhythm is fine. And noticing your body begin to relax as you settle back into the chair or sofa or cushion. You can let gravity do the work and let yourself be held by whatever you are resting against. Letting any thoughts that bubble up just float off. You can catch them again later if you need them. But for now, you can let them go and allow yourself to focus on taking this time to rest. And as you settle into the support of your surroundings here, you might like to imagine a time when you felt strong in the face of a difficult situation, either at work or in another area of life. What resources did you draw on? What helped you get through it? These might have been inner resources, maybe courage, determination, kindness, perseverance, or your sense of humour. Taking a moment to allow those qualities to come to mind. And you might have drawn on outer resources, support from loved ones or colleagues, practical help like good food, exercise you enjoy, or spending time with home comforts or in places that uplift you, perhaps outdoors. So spending a moment noticing who those people were who supported you and the places and things that helped you. Knowing that in this situation now, you have those inner resources with you and they are still there even when you feel frightened or overwhelmed or exhausted. Feeling the stress of this situation and these difficult emotions doesn't make you any less resilient. It makes you human. So we don't have to put on a brave face. Resilience means we are struggling and drawing on our resources to keep us going. We don't have to grow a thicker skin and pretend it's all okay. But acknowledging that in the midst of this difficulty, in the midst of our fear or our exhaustion, we still have skills, qualities, and expertise that are helpful. In the midst of things feeling out of control, there are still things we can take charge of. And knowing that you don't have to do this on your own. Resilience is about drawing on the support around you. That might mean taking your rest breaks, accepting help, alerting senior staff to things that need addressing, or asking for support when you're not sure about something or just need to share how you're feeling with someone who cares. So taking a moment to recognise that you are resilient in your own imperfect and human way. You are doing the best you can with the resources you have. The contribution you make, however small it might seem in the moment, is helping your patients and helping your colleagues and your team. Knowing that your work and the efforts you are making are deeply appreciated. So I'd like to finish with some words from the poet Maya Angelou. This is from her poem Continue. Into a world which needed you, my wish for you is that you continue. Continue to be who and how you are, to astonish a mean world with your acts of kindness. Continue to allow humour to lighten the burden of your tender heart. And so when you're ready, just coming back to a sense of sitting or lying here, feeling your body supported, feeling the sensations of contact with the chair or the sofa, whatever you're resting against. And when you're ready, opening your eyes if you've had them closed. Then you might feel like you want to have a bit of a stretch, maybe a drink of water. So taking a moment for any simple ways to look after yourself that you need. And taking this sense of caring for yourself into the next moments of your day.
Thank you all.